I'm in Washington, D.C., and I am outside of Ford's Theater National Historic Site. This is where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 14th, 1865. I'll also be visiting the house that he died in. Ford's Theater was built and opened in 1863 by John Ford. It is located about 6 blocks from the White House, so it was convenient for President Lincoln to come see a show to get away from the stress and mayhem that he was constantly dealing with. But one night he attended a show on April 14th, 1865, would end up one of the most fateful nights in American history. The theater has learned its lesson, and they make sure that no firearms are allowed inside anymore. First, I went to the museum in the basement. Ford's Theater is very popular, and you're only allowed a certain amount of time inside. And they only gave me 20 minutes inside the museum, which is the best collection of Lincoln assassination abilia in the country, so that was cruel. President Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860, and that was a breaking point for the South. The southern states began seceding and formed the CSA, and the Civil War broke out soon into his first term. This knife and brass knuckles were given to him by his guard before he got to Washington to protect himself after an assassination plot in Baltimore. Again, this is when he was president-elect. These are some antique playbills of the theater after it opened. It is still an operating theater, and presidents have dared to attend shows since, but they didn't get assassinated, luckily. This is a letter Lincoln wrote to General McClellan. They had a lot of problems with each other. That was Tad Lincoln's toy sword, and there's some original china from the Lincoln White House. That is a table used by Lincoln, along with his gloves, used inkwell, shaving mug, and paperweight. These are statues of office seekers. Lincoln constantly had to deal with dozens of people walking right into the White House wanting jobs in the administration. At least none of them killed him like Garfield. Mary Todd Lincoln's opera glass case, tickets to that night's performance, and Major Rathbone's calling card. This is one of Lincoln's death masks. An original playbill for the play, and I didn't realize at the time, but the flag in the background is the one John Wilkes Booth got caught on when he jumped off the box. This is the overcoat that the president was wearing when he was assassinated, and probably died wearing it. Really an unbelievable relic. This is one of the pillows Lincoln's head was put on in his deathbed, and that is his blood. Those are original fragments of wallpaper from Peterson House. The house and theater became a focal point for relic collecting immediately after the assassination. This was the inner door to the presidential box that Lincoln would have walked through, and that John Wilkes Booth opened and walked through to shoot him. Those are the gloves Major Henry Rathbone was wearing that night. And that is the knife used by John Wilkes Booth to stab Major Rathbone after shooting Lincoln. Engraved on it are the words "Liberty" and "America." The Spencer carbine was with Booth during his escape and hiding after the assassination, and there are some guns of the conspirators. George Atzerott's knife. He was supposed to assassinate Vice President Andrew Johnson that night, but he got drunk instead. This was the boot John Wilkes Booth was wearing, and the one on the leg he broke jumping off the presidential box, and this boot was cut off by Dr. Mudd the next day. More relics related to Booth and the conspirators. Unfortunately, it's so dark and all my pictures turned out bad, so I'm not sure exactly what they are. And they have statues of the conspirators, of course, the famed actor John Wilkes Booth. Here's George Atzerodt. He was staying at the same place as Andrew Johnson that night, but he lost his nerve and got drunk. Mary Surratt provided boarding to the conspirators, and her trial was and still is very controversial, but she was hanged with the rest of them, the first woman in American history. Anne Lewis Powell, whom many find very attractive, stabbed Secretary of State William Seward to near death that night. There are relatively few objects that completely changed history, and this is one of them. This is John Wilkes Booth Derringer, a one-shot .44 caliber pistol used to shoot and kill Abraham Lincoln. The bullet that took the life of a leader and legend came right out of that barrel. Now this is inside the preserved theater. This is a replica of Lincoln's life mask made a few months before his assassination. The clock in the foyer is stopped at 7:22, the time Lincoln died at. This is from the first floor level, looking up at the presidential box. These are the stairs that Lincoln and Booth would have ascended that fateful night, and Lincoln was carried down after he was shot. And this is the balcony level by the box. Of course, I sat up here for the presentation. This is as close of a view I can give of what Lincoln could last see. He would have been looking down at the stage when shot. The theater has been changed a bit. Again, a lot of relic hunters, relics of the theater and event are scattered across the country. The chairs people sit in are not original. The stage is frequently altered because it is a functioning theater, and the ceiling is really cool, very well preserved.
Guests would have come in, casually makes his way over towards the side wall there. Well, many in the theater that night here during the play, they saw John Wilkes Booth. It's an instantly, famously recognizable. And in fact, many on the balcony level, as they saw Booth casually make his approach towards that outer yellow door there, they thought that President Lincoln had sent a messenger, had summoned John Wilkes Booth here to Ford's Theater that night, maybe wanted to say hello to him. President Lincoln knew of John Wilkes Booth as an actor and seen him perform here at Ford's Theater in a play called The Marble Heart in 1863. So while they knew of one another, there's no record we know of that they ever met one another face to face. In any event, based on eyewitness accounts, as Booth approached to that outer yellow door there, he casually reached into his pocket, pulled out a calling card of some sort, presented it to a messenger named Charles Forbes, who had taken the place of the guard Parker, who was believed wandered somewhere else in the theater. You have to understand that it was more customary than mandatory for the guard to remain just outside that outer yellow theater box door in case President Lincoln needed to run any messages, just so long as someone was there. Words are exchanged between the two. John Wilkes Booth probably simply said he wanted to pay his respects to Mr. Lincoln. He's admitted in, so no reason not to. Once Booth goes through that outer door there, quickly closes it behind him. He then grabs an elongated wood bar he had earlier taken from a music stand here in the theater. He'll throw it up between the door and the wall, effectively barricading that outer yellow door so that no one can follow behind him. He then proceeds towards the two other doors, one marked box 7, box 8. There's only one actor on the stage at that point, Harry Clark, playing the American cousin. He does not know that Booth has just gone through that door. He's about to utter the funniest line of the entire play. And Booth knew this all along. The line that Hawk uttered went like this, quote, "Don't know the manners of good society, eh? Well, I guess I know enough to turn you inside out, old gal, you sock-dologizing old man-trap," unquote. Now, back in 1865, that was pretty funny, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine, if you will, roar of laughter. It is at that instant that Booth steps through one of those two doors, unseen and unheard, from behind, pulls out a single shot .44 Derringer pistol, levels it at the back of Lincoln's head, just a few inches away, fires the weapon. The bullet enters just above Lincoln's left ear, travels diagonally through the brain and lodging up behind the right eye. When Lincoln is shot, he slumps immediately unconscious in the rocker there, but is not killed outright. And as gun smoke ascends up and out of that theater box, Major Rathbone, hearing a muffled sound with a laugh, returns, sees the gun smoke slowly clear, sees Booth standing behind the rocker. His first thought is to take him out immediately. Booth drops the Derringer into the floor of the theater box, pulls out a dagger. The Rathbone thereupon raises his left arm in order to shield himself. And Booth takes the weapon and inflicts a stab wound in Rathbone's left arm, down the bone, deep gash wound. And Rathbone reels back from the wound, and Booth then turns to jump, leaps over the balustrade to the right of the Prince of Washington. And as Booth leaps over, it's believed he catches the spur of the center flag there, causing him to fall off balance, crashing into the stage right in this area here. It's about 12 feet or so. Though possibly breaking the left leg. With the bloody dagger still in his hand from which he has just gotten Major rap, when he slowly rises on the stage here, turns faces the audience, yells out the words, "Sic semper tyrannis." That's the Latin, "Thus ever to tyrants." So, major public figure on a stage, making a public utterance for all to see here. Then at a quick pace, across the stage in this direction, Booth proceeds towards the back room door where he first came in, mounts his horse behind the theater and escapes.
Hard to believe it all happened right there. Unfortunately, they let no one inside the box, and I know they used to have the door open with plexiglass over it so you can stand and look inside, but I've been here twice and they've kept the first door shut. President Lincoln was sitting right there, was shot, and his consciousness ended right there. That is not the chair. I have seen it at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. I don't know this for a fact, but I heard that the chair of Mary Todd Lincoln and the Rathbone sofa are original, and that George Washington portrait was still there over 150 years ago as well. And the path that John Wilkes Booth fell again. And here are busts of the president. After getting shot, he was carried outside of the theater, across the streets, into the Peterson House, where he died the next morning. The home was a boarding house built in 1839 by William Peterson. Actually, future Vice President John C. Breckinridge rented a room in the house in 1852. This was a chaotic and tragic place that night. This is the foyer Lincoln was rushed through. Mary Todd Lincoln and family and friends sat in this parlor between deathbed visits. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, who effectively became Commander-in-Chief and President for that night, used this bedroom to hold cabinet meetings, interview witnesses, and ordered the pursuit of Booth that night. And this is the back bedroom that Abraham Lincoln passed away in. Stanton said at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, 1865, "Now he belongs to the ages." That was the deathbed location, although it is not the bed. It is at the Chicago History Museum, but still, it's one of the most sad and eerie rooms I've ever been in, knowing Lincoln died right there. Now into the Center for Education and Leadership. No president had been assassinated before, and this was just 5 days after General Lee's surrender. Lincoln's funeral was one of the largest in world history. The funeral train carried his body and his son Willie, who died in 1862, back to Springfield, Illinois, and had big funeral processions at each of these attended by millions. This is supposed to be his casket. For accuracy's sake, gotta say, because I'm such a nerd, that's not what the casket looked like. It was extremely elaborate, so they probably don't have the money to recreate it. These are relics of the funeral, mourning ribbons, and also a handle from the original casket. These are pieces of catafalque, likely for the big setup for his casket used in each city. This map was used by John Wilkes Booth for his escape. He survived 12 days after that night. Martial law was imposed and thousands of soldiers were sent after him, finding him in a barn and killing him in Port Royal, Virginia on April 26th. These keys were owned by him and found on his body. Also, there is a conspiracy that they didn't get him and that he escaped to Texas. And that is the saddle used by John Wilkes Booth in his escape. The other conspirators were captured soon after and given a military tribunal. These are some of their shackles and jail cell keys. They were all hanged on July 7th, 1865. These are pieces of their ropes. This is a replica of the hoods they were forced to wear that covered their faces in prison. And they have an exhibit on Lincoln's legacy, most importantly, being featured in Marvel Comics. He's been one of the most merchandisable people ever, and has created a new Lincoln merch market ever since. In terms of his leadership and ideas and policy, he has inspired many presidents and people since, like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Dwight D. Eisenhower, who took a lot from Lincoln's philosophies. President Eisenhower owned this Lincoln plaque. This is one of the coolest things here, a 3-story, 34-foot tall tower of books about Lincoln. It's got about 7,000 unique books about Lincoln. He is one of the most written about people ever. The titles are real, but they don't tell you that the books are actually fake. They're aluminum replicas, so I was very disappointed when I did research and found that out. But it's still pretty neat. Coming here in person, seeing where our 16th president was killed is just amazing. But anyways, if you like this video, I have other videos on roadside attractions, museums, pretty much anywhere Lincoln related. So if you like that, then please subscribe and go watch my other videos. Thanks for watching.